Welcome to the podcast Leadership Forum, the conversation with leaders who serve the public good. My name is Trevor Brown, and I'm privileged to serve as Dean of the John Glenn College of Public Affairs at The Ohio State University, where we aspire to fulfill a simple phrase that Senator John Glenn used to describe what we do: inspire citizenship and develop leadership. I also have the honor of serving as the host of this conversation series, so welcome to a thoughtful and reflective conversation about leadership. I'm joined today by Ellie Valentine, who currently serves as the Chief of Party of Winrock International in Central Asia, an organization dedicated to preventing regional trafficking of human persons across the area. Ellie is the definition of wanderlust. I have worked with Ellie myself, little truth in advertising. Ellie and I are good friends, and I started my relationship with Ellie in Kiev, Ukraine, after she had spent time in Poland. But after Ukraine, Ellie has gone on to many parts of the former Soviet Union, including the Stans, Bangladesh, and other countries far afield, in two principal roles. One, in serving as a chief of party of what are referred to as legislative strengthening programs, helping legislatures around the world navigate the transition towards operating as democratic parliamentary bodies. And then second, as chief of party for counter-trafficking programs, like the one that she's running now for Winrock. So Ellie has been involved in managing distributed organizations in which the central office is usually located somewhere in the United States, but she's running the office that is operating far afield. So as we all navigate the virtual world, Ellie's been doing it for decades across time zones and geographic boundaries. But she's also been working in contexts where her role as a female leader is often novel and new. Many of these are places where women have not often been in charge of organizations. So as we venture into this conversation, I'm eager to seek her thoughts on what she's learned in those contexts. So Ellie, thanks for joining me for a conversation about your leadership.
Thanks for having me, Trevor. Good to see you.
So it's good to see you. It's been too long. You've been doing this for a long time all over the world. In many of the places you've worked in, you've started as an outsider. What are some of the strategies you've developed for building trust and credibility with those you serve, but also those you manage and lead? Because you're often working with people from those contexts.
The word that I would put to that is respect.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to start from a position of respect for the cultural environment in which you are going to be working, understanding that cultural environment. So, in some ways, I sort of try to do a deep dive into what is the history and culture of the country where I'm going to be working. And I think that sort of mitigates some of that outsiderness. Early on, it was also learning the language. Certainly, I went to Ukraine knowing some Slavic languages, but not Ukrainian. But I found that by learning Ukrainian, that really opened doors. But it not only opened doors for me, but it opened my mind to understanding the cultural nuances and specifics of Ukrainian culture. So I think, reading, watching films, going to the theater, music and contemporary performance, whether it's visual arts or performing arts, cuisine.
I was about to say,
definitely.
I don't know if it was written into your first contract with our project, but I do remember our boss was like, "Hey, find some good restaurants while you're at it, Ellie."
And didn't we though?
You did. You did an exceptional job.
So I think all kidding aside, understanding that deep dive into the cultural and historical meat of a country that you're working in also provides you with legitimate and sincere opportunities to have genuine conversations with people about that. It's not just sort of surface. but it also helps you understand how problems have evolved
Mhm.
and how solutions to those problems might be, specifically tailored to those cultural contexts. And I think, if what helped us to be successful in the project that we worked on together in Ukraine was both understanding that cultural context,
Yep.
providing international best experience or comparative experience for them to learn from, but providing it in Ukrainian so that they could have discussions among themselves in Ukrainian with us, and come up with their own solutions that would work in Ukraine. And I think that was really important.
Actually, let me just underline that, because I think that's so critical. I'm actually curious. So this is for those listening. Ellie and I worked on a legislative strengthening program together that started in 1994 and ran through 2013. And Ellie was chief of party at two periods during that time, both at the dawn of the program and towards the end of it. And I think one of the hallmarks of that program was, just as you described, we listened to the unit we were serving, and we tried to provide the world's experience rather than impose the right answer, i.e., here's what the United States does, replicate it. I'm curious if that's been a strategy you've used in other contexts, and has that proved successful?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, pretty much everywhere I work. First of all, you have the incredible honor and privilege of working with really talented people, and bringing a team together that is both diverse in its perspective on and looking at problems, but also able to brainstorm together to really debate issues, to not be accepting of just oh, yes, sir, that's what that's what we're going to do. No, but to really question authority, question the reliability, question the outcome. So often we would see things that would say, well, we should try this. And somebody would say, well, yeah, they wrote that law in, 1974, but how was it implemented?
Right.
I mean, what were the problems that came out of it?
Yeah.
What were the disputes subsequent to that, to that statute? And then, you could really think about what was going to happen in the future. So I think that was, there was a lesson that we learned together in the parliamentary development project in Ukraine, but it's certainly a modus operandi that I took with me to almost all of my other work abroad as well. Yeah.
So you and I witnessed this. We worked together, but I've also heard and can imagine that this is an experience you've had in other contexts. You were often, in some cases, the first woman to be in a leadership role where the people reporting to you were not. That was just not something they'd ever had that experience before, and they came from cultures where women often weren't in managerial or leadership roles. And I'm imagining that that's occurred in some of the other places you've been. What are some of the strategies that you've employed? Or actually, before we get to strategies, what has that experience been like? And what are some of the challenges that you faced in those contexts?
So I look at women's leadership as more a question of accepting anyone as a leader. And it might be someone who's very young but very competent. But if they're competent, then they gain the trust and respect of their team. I believe that one of the the key attributes of good leadership is listening. And I think I've always gone into a situation of where I have had to take on the responsibilities of leadership, and I've often had to do it after somebody else has failed, unfortunately. So it often has involved understanding why that failed. And so that meant listening. And it meant, again, having done the deep dive into the cultural circumstances that that team is working in, to be able to then evolve with the team to their needs. Now, being a woman, for example, in Pakistan, I was very concerned about it, and I thought, that it would be a huge challenge. Although, we know that historically Pakistan was the first Islamic country to have a woman leader, political leader. But what I found was that I could go one-on-one with male counterparts, and they would respect me for the position that I held, and they would respect that I was the leader of that particular project. And it allowed me an entree to work with women that I would not have had if I were a man. So it really was a bonus. And that was something that was similarly in Bangladesh, in Yemen. I think I also felt a similar type of relationship that absolutely I could garner the respect of male colleagues, but I had also that opportunity to have a special relationship with women colleagues that I might not have had if I had been a man in that position.
So let's use that to pivot to the work you're doing now, the important work of preventing the trafficking of humans, often women. What are you could limit it to the region you're in, but you've had this experience, as you said earlier, across various contexts. What are the primary drivers of human trafficking? What are the causal factors that make it occur?
It's really interesting because we just had a very long discussion about this today with some of our researchers who are doing studies on vulnerability, and the lack of economic opportunity has always been a driver of persons pursuing opportunities outside of their home environment. And by pursuing those opportunities, perhaps with the skills, perhaps not with the skills, perhaps without knowing what the legal requirements are, puts them at risks and make them vulnerable to the scams of traffickers. But also, especially when we were working in Ukraine in the 2000s, and it was, domestic violence was certainly a push factor. That continues to be an issue of situations where women especially are not respected in their home, and so they look to seek opportunities outside the home that could be either domestically within their own country or internationally. Conflict situations. So right now, many of the organizations that we worked with in Ukraine, and I want to give them credo because they have been doing this work for more than 20 years, and they're still doing it, and they're facing especially difficult situations now to keep people safe, and especially all of these women and children who are exiting Ukraine into countries where they're not familiar with the country culture, the language, the economic opportunities, the laws, that they become vulnerable to someone scamming them, or manipulating them, or abusing them and exploiting them. And so anyone can be open to exploitation. And unfortunately, traffickers are always one step ahead. And we're finding now that we have a lot of people both in South Asia, but also in Central Asia, and I'm sure in other places, that are being recruited on the face to be involved in internet transactions. But once they get to the destination that they've been recruited to, they're forced into cybercrime. So and usually limited freedom of movement from where they've been brought, that creates a vulnerability. They often can find a way out if they know that there are places that they can turn to for help. And that's one of the things that we do.
Yeah, I was going to ask, but lay out what do you do, and what are the things that have been
especially
effective?
Yeah, especially our NGO partners do a lot of what we call pre-departure orientation for labor migrants who are considering going abroad, making sure that they have contracts, making sure that they know who's in hiring them.
Yep.
Also, that we're on the policy level, we're trying to get labor recruitment agencies to have employer paid fees rather than employee paid fees, so that a laborer doesn't go already in debt bondage to a country and then can be exploited or manipulated by the employer. So, increasing their knowledge about the environment that the destination that they're planning on going to as a migrant, whether student, could also be, could be a student, could be a laborer, or even a tourist. What we try to do at a policy level, as I mentioned, trying to make sure that or companies are adhering to fair labor practices and not participating in forced labor practices, but also that laws that are passed have teeth, and that the criminal justice actors are able to pursue cases. And it's very hard because it's usually they're transnational crimes. It's expensive to investigate. It's difficult, across cultures to trade evidence. There are mechanisms for mutual legal assistance. There's mechanisms for transnational referral mechanisms of survivors so that they get the psychological, medical, or legal assistance that can help them to both to revive and rehabilitate once they're repatriated, but hopefully also to help in the investigation and criminal proceedings against the perpetrators. So it's difficult. It's a complex problem.
I was about to say, sounds complex. So now I'm going to ask you to that end. I'm going to ask you a question I asked you before, although I asked you at the individual level. Now I want to ask you at the organizational level. So I asked you about sort of how you personally have approached working in a context where you're the outsider. Well, here, your organization is the outsider in the sense that you gave us the background. It's a US-based NGO. It's funded by USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development. And you're working in this very complex, sensitive context in which people have lost trust. They've been trafficked, or they're fearing this. How have you positioned your organization to be a credible, respected actor?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Trevor, because I think it has to do with building the partnerships with local counterparts. Yep. So building partnerships with the NGO community, helping them to be on top of the trends and developments in the field, but also to, again, listen to them. Where are the areas that you need capacity strengthening? What new things do you need to learn? What new resources do you need to have? What new tools do we need to develop together? And so most of the time, the interventions that we have come through those local partners, whether they're NGOs or government partners. We have some very strong government partners that are introducing innovation and really embracing the opportunities to innovate and to apply the knowledge that they're learning. We just had a meeting last week in the capital of Kazakhstan, Astana, and a young civil servant from the Ministry of Social Protection had been at a presentation of some draft guidelines that we had developed, and we had issued the draft because we wanted feedback. And he said in the meeting, and this was about 2 weeks afterwards, he said in the meeting, he said, "Yeah, I took that, I scanned it, I sent it to all my guys on all the regions. They're already using it." And we said, "But Mahmoud, those are draft." He said, "But they need it now. So I mean, to have people like that who are so enthusiastic is just, I mean, it's just really rewarding, and it just, that's what keeps you going is that kind of level of enthusiasm readiness to do something different, and to be able to be open to those opportunities that, again, we don't come with the answers.
Yeah.
But thanks to USAID, thanks to the American people, the American taxpayer, we're able to provide some of the resources that they might not otherwise have to pursue some of those innovations and some of those interventions.
Well, as we pull this really interesting conversation to a close, I want you to come back to a personal question to you. And I want you to be thinking of advice you'd give to young people who are starting their career and perhaps have some wanderlust like you did. And your line, like most people's line, was not a straight line. You were trained as a librarian, and you spoke some Polish, and then all of a sudden you're in Ukraine running a legislative strengthening program. And now you're doing something where obviously I can see the connections, but it's not as if like, oh yeah, this thing leads to that thing. What's your advice and guidance to young people who are embarking on what they hope to be an engaging journey that's adding value when you don't know where that line's going to take you?
And you don't ever. And thanks for mentioning. I mean, I think that any training can prepare you for that profession. I was trained in library science. I've never worked in a library, but I use all of those tools of librarianship in everything I do. Whether it's citizen access to information, or it's innovation, or it's management, it really doesn't matter. So I think you have to, first of all, not define yourself by your degree, or, say, oh, okay, that's what I did, so that's what I'm going to do. To be absolutely open to opportunities, and to see beyond, the obvious. To stretch yourself out of that comfort zone, and to be vulnerable. We talk about the vulnerability of people to trafficking, but vulnerability is also about being able to be open and to make mistakes, and to sometimes you pursue something and it doesn't work, but sometimes you do, and it's absolutely amazing and so rewarding. And you look back, I look back and I see the people that we've worked with who have accomplished so much, and I feel so proud to have had the opportunity to have worked with them and to be able to call them my friends today. And I think that's just a treasure, to be able to have that cadre of people that you can depend on, and hopefully they can depend on me as well. And we move forward together with better understanding of each other, and what the possibilities are in our world. And it might be a little Pollyannish, but I really do believe that with a greater understanding of the diversity of the world, but also of our commonalities, that we can all have quality futures together.